Bam.
Hey, this is Christopher Huttleston, and you're watching the Break It Down show. Cheers.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thanks for coming on, Christopher. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
We don't really know each other, but we used to hang out a little bit for our short amount of time. We were in the same unit, the 165th
yeah,
Delta Company, 165th MI Battalion, a counterintelligence company. And we would work out together and that sort of thing, fellow glasses wearers, and
yeah.
I guess a good mix of bookish and athletic, for us. And so I don't know why, but you always stuck in my head as a good dude, and I wish we would have had more time together in the military.
I appreciate that, man. I do. And that's why do you think I agreed to chat with you, right? So, there were very few people I actually had an issue with when I look back at a 23-year career. Very few. So I mean that's one thing. And one thing I thought about, like, it's like you almost want to put a sort of. I don't do really social media. I do LinkedIn just because I sort of have to for my day job. But it's like you just want to sort of holler, like, hey, if we broke bread together or had a drink together back in the day, man, feel free to reach out anytime because I miss that stuff. I love. We have an American Legion post here. I have some great friends there because I'm guessing for you as well. You probably have lots of other friends too, but there's something special about hanging out with some veterans, and it's even really more interesting if you have an actual commonality, right? A unit or a duty station or whatever it might be, and you actually knew each other at one point. Because when you think back, how you meet someone, and you have to be like so forward because you don't know if you're going to be able to hang out with this person tomorrow or how long, right? So that's one thing I really enjoyed. 165th was my first duty location after, basic and AIT. And that's one thing I noticed right away. We had a lot of great people there. And I wasn't, I'm not a shy person. So it was nice. And there were a lot of not shy people there too. So it was easy to make friends, and you're just like, dude, you seem okay. Let's go have a drink, right? And it's like, there wasn't, you weren't dancing around any junk. You just like, hey, you're not an asshole. Let's hang out.
Yeah. The thing that I remember about the 165th was, and I'll just say guys like us. And again, I barely know you, right? Like we were, becoming friends many years ago. Then you went off to selection. I think you came back for a couple of weeks, but really you were transitioning out of that unit. And so, we weren't going to really have a chance to do this. But one of the things I know, and there's Randy
McPeak.
Randy's an awesome dude.
Oh, crazy.
The Army struggles with, and the 165th struggled with, how to deal with us young guys who had an aptitude, were in fantastic shape, weren't afraid to work out, weren't afraid to work. And look, I wanted to smash my peers. I'm like, and look, in a friendly way, like competitive way, like you go as hard as you can at doing Army stuff. I'll go as hard as I can, and we'll see who wins, right? And the Army struggles with people like that. Like, how do you deal with them? A guy like Pete Jensen, he's like, I'm out of here. He leaves.
Yeah.
So, what was your experience? Like, when I look back, I think, man, what a bunch of missed opportunities. I don't know if you knew Brian Fuller, but here was this huge human who was powerful and smart.
Yeah.
And the Army had no idea what to do with him.
We had I think, a surprisingly great group of people there. That set my stage for how I felt about the Army, right? And the military in general. We had great people there. Pete and I were great friends. We used to work out do extra shit every weekend, and we'd party together all the time. We used to go to O'Reilly's Irish Pub in Heidelberg, man. We used to live there on the weekends, not even just the weekends, of course. I ran into Pete a few years later when we were both doing some other fun stuff. Great dude. I haven't talked to him in 20 years or something. But that was my trouble. Like, so, I wanted to do some interesting stuff, and the Army kept telling me, like, what you need is a tour in Korea, right? And I'm like, what do I need a tour? That's not that there's necessarily anything wrong with the tour in Korea, but that wasn't, sort of where I was aiming for. But one thing I had at the start that gave me some hope, is when I was in basic training, actually, even before, that 3 days before basic starts, when they're doing security processing, especially if you have TSSCI clearance and all that stuff. I got, like the final interviewer was like a CW3 CI guy, finishes the interview and says, all right, let's talk about what you're going to do in the military, because I think you're going to get bored pretty quick unless you sort of have some ideas. And he's the first, he talked to me about TSCM. He talked to me about polygraph. I think he talked to me about languages. So, fast forward 6 months, a year, to whatever it was, when you start getting bored, I did remember that conversation. So I thought, there are people there, right? The system does have a way, and the way the system does it, it has some good people there, right? That can, I don't want to say recognize talent, because I don't think I necessarily looked like anything other than a whatever, every other person in basic training, right? But it's like, it was neat that somebody took a moment of his day, when he's probably seeing how many people going through basic training, to basically offer some realistic advice and useful advice. I thought that was really something. That was like literally the first officer I talked to in the military, right? Was this warrant officer, and he offered that advice. And it's just crazy. So
yeah, it is crazy.
I see you posted an interview with Pete. I gotta see that.
Yeah, I'll shoot that link over to you. Everybody should check these things out. Look, we've got all kinds of people who worked in this field. And look, Chris, I say the word spies because I look at it from our adversary's point of view. And if I'm nosing around at a Baghdad barbershop, guess what they're going to accuse me of, right?
Yeah.
And so we just start there. And I know we get uncomfortable with that as an industry, as an intelligence community. But the God's honest truth is, we're all playing that game, man. That's what we do.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was weird. I came in with a healthy dose of paranoia. It's just sort of who I am. I did the CI thing for a while, and then I got into some other stuff. And it started. I was on a deployment in Kuwait, and I talked to some folks, and some folks talked to me, and it just sort of. I decided to drop a packet, with the agency, and it just sort of seemed a very natural progression for me, and that worked out extremely well. But I look back at this very critically. I think I can safely say I would not have wanted to go into the agency without going to the military first of all. And I can say as much as the agency was like in some ways the absolute perfect place for me. Absolutely loved the work, loved the job, especially the early days when you're more junior. It's way more fun. But probably when I was happiest and most sort of comfortable with myself is probably in the Army. I mean, that's I think part of why, I have a couple groups of friends. I have a group of friends that has no relation to anything military or government at all.
Yeah.
Then I have a much smaller group of friends that did things like I used to do. Then I have a military group of friends that's sizable, and that's the group of friends I relax with the most. Like we talk about, and I have friends from college, so that's different. But the group of friends, my military group of friends, and it's funny because I don't give a shit what you did in the military, right? It doesn't matter what you did or where you did it or who you did it with, right? If you raised your right hand, took an oath to the Constitution, and then I think the most important thing is you basically said, I'm willing to serve wherever I'm needed, right? That's the real kicker, right? All the other shit is bullshit, because the moment you literally say, I am willing to serve where I'm needed, now you've given over control. That's a fucking leap of faith, right?
Yeah.
That is a leap of faith. All the others, you can raise your hands, Constitution, right?
Yeah.
What does that really mean? Until you actually say, yeah, and I'm willing to go anywhere at any time, right?
Yeah.
So, I spoke at some VFW or Veterans Affairs thing a couple of years ago. It was kind of horrible because some people had, they were so severely impacted that it crushed me. I felt horrible for some of the problems they were dealing with, and I felt like I just skated through, right? But people, oh, I was just a truck driver. I'm like, just a truck driver in Iraq? Are you freaking kidding me? Can you imagine anything more dangerous outside of literally room clearing in Fallujah, right? Driving a truck on an MSR in IED Central. I mean, you don't say you're just a truck driver, right?
Yeah.
I mean, holy crap. Right?
I got to jump in and echo it. I want to echo this. Let me jump in here because this is important. You have this all the time. You hear people say "just." It's a trigger word for me. Where I'm like, hold on.
I know, it drives me nuts.
You're just a lieutenant. You were the 4. You fed people. You made sure they had clothes. You made we need you and the people you led to go do that and give me a glint tape patch when I asked for it. You guys had these things that enabled me to do my job, right? Yeah. So sorry to jump in, but it is one of those things when you hear someone say, "Oh, I was just a this." Bullshit. You're a warrior.
Yeah, bullshit.
You went to war.
Yeah. I agree. I don't know. I was on my soapbox. I don't remember where I was going.
Well, let me take you in a different direction anyhow, because this is an interesting thing. So I can tell someone, and look, I've spent a lot of time doing this show thing now, but back when I was active in the field, I was pretty open about what I did because it doesn't really matter. You know what I'm doing, I'm not doing here. I'm like, I was living in Las Vegas and I would say, yeah, I work overseas. I'm an intelligence agent. Some people would call me a spy. I'm a counter, whatever you want to call me. And they're like, bullshit. They would never believe me, And I'm like, you can't say it. And I'm like, why can't you? It's a job. And look, it's not like me talking to you in this bar. Like I'm talking to you because you have this tight shirt on and you have a pretty smile. And, like, I'm not talking to you because I think you're a warlord. It's a different thing.
Right.
People would never believe it. And a lot of my friends still don't believe it, or they just accept it now because I've run my mouth enough about it. But we do have these jobs that are literally unbelievable.
Yeah. So, I spent so I did 23 years total. 17 was really undercover, right? And I joked, I mean, it's true, but I joke like I had all these unusable cool points, right? Because the whole thing is you're supposed to just be this boring, whatever, bureaucrat, diplomat, whatever your cover is, right?
Right.
And being the gray man, being, beige and brown. But in reality, right, you're the person that is actually literally trained and tasked and paid to speak truth to power, right?
Right.
And it's an interesting thing. You get into, I think a lot of people get into it as they get into lots of different jobs in the military because it's like, oh, it looks cool, and I want to do something cool, right? But it is humbling when you think about the role that we're, all of us, probably, all the folks that you've already interviewed, we've all able to, we're trusted to be out there both representing and collecting information that actually could turn a battleship around, right? Could start or stop a treaty, could start or stop a war, can have an effect in millions and millions of dollars a year annually in the U.S. budget, right? These are things that are actually commonplace for people that have roles in the intelligence community and are actively engaged in that, right? It's not fiction. That is not from a story. Those are things that happen on a daily basis, and they happen with the younger set, right? The younger troops, the younger intelligence officers, operatives, soldiers, because in the early days you're out there doing more collecting, you're doing more interacting with people. As you get more senior, you're doing more managing, right? So you need to have that experience to understand what to do with the information, but and how to properly convey it and things like that. But one thing that was so interesting is how important the younger folks are in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
One of the things that I had, look, in our careers, so let me back up. I'm going to say this. You hop over from the Army side to the CIA side. This is pre 9/11. That is not a known path. The CIA is terrible at recruiting in that way directly, so it's there. The Army is great at saying they don't care about you, and the CIA is great at acting that way. And so it does take a bit of good fortune to reliably bridge that gap. Look, it's one thing to say, fuck it, I'll put a packet in. And it's another thing to be like, a year later, like, holy shit, they picked me. That's not a reliable path. Did you just say fuck it? Or did you think like you actually had someone in there saying, hey, this is Christopher, he's a guy that we're going to bring over?
So this honestly goes back to years ago. I decided like late in high school, and honestly, part of this is I had great parents.
Okay.
Supportive parents, wonderful parents, who thankfully are still alive to this day, and I'm very close with my mom. My dad is having some issues, but I'm very close with my mom after disappearing for 20 some years, right? But I was always of the opinion that all these cool people, I don't care how famous they are, I don't care, literally astronauts, they are just people like us. Right? So certain jobs have literal requirements, right? I did look at that NASA astronaut program, but I said, my study habits are atrocious and there's no way I want to go get a PhD. And, I have a bachelor's in computer science, but I was like, there's no way I want to, do all that.
Yeah.
So it's like, there are some things that you have to have to do. Like you and I can't just go decide to be a doctor, right? You have to go to medical school.
Right.
But other than that, people are able to do things, right? There's, and this is, one thing that we need to do a better job explaining to everyone, no matter your race, color, religion, whatever, that we all should have the same opportunities. And in fact, the way it's supposed to work in America is we all have the same opportunities. So that's, it's long-winded of saying, like, I said, I can, if other people can do it, I can do it. Now, you can always say no, right?
Right.
Military certainly told me no more than once, but I just said, I'm going to give it a try. And the other thing that was, it's the goof, if you have a moment for a funny story.
We're here for funny stories and moments. Yeah.
I got approached, who I did get approached by, was a classified special mission unit. And they actually came after me. And I went and did their thing. And I didn't get selected. Now, I knew the guy that did get selected. He was 100% qualified and more, he had everything I had in more years. And so I had no hard feelings there. But I also felt like I didn't do the best job. I kept trying to anticipate what they wanted to hear. I wasn't good at interviews. And this was an actual job interview, right? It wasn't a panel like you'd have a promotion panel. It's more like a job interview. And I just felt like I didn't do great and I wasn't myself. So I said, well, screw this. I don't want any job that where I would have to fake it, who I am, right? So I said, whatever the next thing is, I'm just going to be myself. So I dropped a packet with the agency and then I deployed. I was in 5th Group, 1st Battalion, MI Det. And I was living with a buddy, Jason. What is his last name? A Lurs guy from Darmstadt. He was from the Lurs Battalion.
Echo Company 51st.
Lurs, right. Echo, yeah, Lurs Company. Jason, we always call him Fred. It's the funniest thing. We reconnected at Fort Campbell, and then when I got my E6, we decided to live off post together. So I get deployed. I go to Kuwait, 5th Group. It was a great deployment, a lot of fun. And he said, hey, somebody just called. They want to talk to you when you get back from Kuwait. And I had completely forgotten that I dropped the packet with the agency. Completely.
Yeah.
And I thought it was this other unit. And I had sort of moved on mentally. Oh, the other thing, actually, there were 2 units. So, and the second unit talked to me, and they said, we want you, but we can't tell you for sure until you re-enlist. And I said, okay, I re-enlist and you take me, and then you take me. He goes, no, you re-enlist for 8 years, and then you will see if we want you. I'm like, are you kidding me right
That's
now?
not a very good
This
deal.
is what we're talking about, right? This is like, can you make it any dumber? Right.
Right.
So that, so I said, thanks, but no thanks. I go to Jason, it sends me an email. Hey, these guys want to talk to you. I said, tell them I'm not interested in anything I have to re-enlist for without a commitment. Right. He writes back to me. He goes, dude, I think you want to talk to these guys. And I'm like, tell them to fuck off. Right. This is over email. I'm like, tell them to fuck off. I'm not interested. And he writes back. He's, dude, I'm literally going to spell this out for you. And he writes literally CIA in the email. So I'm like, oh, okay. Hold all prior comms. Yes, I will talk to them when I get back. And I was in the agency 3 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. It was crazy. It's just some things were, and I put that on. Had I not boloed the prior interview.
Yeah.
And had to do a total hard reset and kind of take a look at myself, I probably would have screwed, like, had I not screwed the first interview, I would have screwed up the agency interview. That's the way I look at it, right? And so there you go.
Yeah. So I want to jump in here because this is part of like this whole conversation. Again, so the path to get to the CIA or FBI, we all have dreams because we don't know what else to dream for. We don't know the landscape of what's around us.
There's a reason I never did drugs, damn it. I wanted to be able to get into one of these places.
That's right. But you said TSCM, Special Forces, Intelligence Detachment, all these different fields, right? There's a book of jobs in the reserves for counterintelligence people where you can just bounce around field office to field office, just being support. Like you can build your own career, but there's no like neat grandmaster sensei guy that says, this is what you should be doing. Like the Army, the second they get one of these incredible people who's super smart and has the people part of it down, they should say, you are now going to be in this program within the CI world, and we're going to make sure we fucking keep you and that you're valuable and that we want you. We're desperate to have you. I left the Army 3 times, right? Regular Army, reserves, DA civilian, right? Nobody ever said, Pete, you're fucking incredible. Let's keep you here, right? They kept wanting me back to help out, but they miss these opportunities. The reason why I say all this stuff is we bleed so much talent. You go to a unit, you get stuffed in ops like Fuller and I did, and you're like, this is not what I joined up for. Yes, I'm going to do my job, but then you sit there and, it's like.
Remember my first job in 165th, I was in the orderly room.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I worked for the commander, the first sergeant, and like I literally just was the memo guy. I'm like, this is why I joined.
Right. And you don't get civilian clothes, you don't get special rations. All of your peers do.
Nothing.
And it's
I was in the barracks.
That's probably when we connected. This is a reason to leave. This is not a reason to stay. So I wanted to say that out loud. I want to tell you my CIA story. So planes hit buildings, and I'm like, well, I have to drop a packet because I know they're looking. This would be my actual chance to do it here, and I can do this job. Because I'd gone to Bosnia, I knew what to do, and so I put the packet in. I get the call back, hey, come down to the hotel here in downtown Chicago, and I go down there and I knock on this door in this hallway, right? 100% true. I knock on the door in the hallway in the hotel, and I think, you know what, and I turn around and I look at the door behind me, right? And sure enough, that door opens. And I'm like, and I lost my respect for the CIA, went through the floor. And it probably showed on my face because I'm so disappointed in you guys for trying to like be spooky and tricky. Like, just fucking be straight. Because I'm a very straightforward kind of guy. And so then I sit in there and then they talk down to me because I wasn't reading The Economist and all these other things. And I'm like, I'm in the reserves. I work in an office building with office people. So I do things. I don't do those things. Could I start reading The Economist?
Yeah.
Great. But what
that
you
is
want,
still my recommendation to people for foreign service.
yeah.
Agencies, read The Economist. Yeah.
But
Still.
don't look down on me as
No.
what matters is that I went to Bosnia and I'd actually run recruited sources. Is that valuable to you? Do you think you can use a guy like me? Do you think I
So
get
on that exact thing, when I came in at about the lowest level you could come in for the program. It's called the Clandestine Service Training Program, which is essentially, it's like going through their service academy. It's like going through Annapolis or West Point for the agency. But I came in, it was a GS 8 or 9, I forget what it was. They brought in this young woman a grade higher because she had a 1-year master's degree, and I had 6 years of human, right?
Yeah.
She had a 1-year master's and whatever, some bullshit thing. And I'm just like, whatever, right? Whatever. I decided it would be worked out in the wash, and it was. I did just fine. But I was just like, okay. Whatever. Yeah. But yeah, that goes to your point. And I think one of the things, and I'm not here to defend the agency at all, but
no, the agency's great. They do their
the
job.
Agency is people, right? It is people, and there are boneheads. I've been fortunate enough to serve in and with some pretty solid elite units. I've never been somewhere that didn't have boneheads, right? I don't care. I don't care the selection criteria. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
Boneheads get through any filter. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Now, the best units have fewer of them, but they're in every unit. I don't care. I don't care how elite. Every unit.
Yeah. And there's another thing too is if you are good, right? There's a sorting process on the other end too. So I would work, and I worked on contracts. I did a bunch of different things. And if I went to a new post or a new camp, or every now and then I'd go check in with the tenant units, because part of my job is to know what's going on. Oh, he needs help. How can I help them? Yeah. And I would go check in, and I'd meet up with guys like you. I'd meet up with guys on other teams that, are doing things that are, different. And we would all recognize each other, be like, oh, yeah, the fact that you're here, that you know how to get in here, that says something. And all I'm trying to do is I don't want to know anything. I'm just, if you need access, if you need capacity, and I have it, even if it's in the gray zone. And by gray, I mean, if it's illegal, I'm interested, and those guys would be like, yeah, let's go. And I went on a lot of things that I probably look in the civilian world and the non-war world, I shouldn't have gone on, but I knew how to pitch my value to somebody. And I tell anybody who's doing counterintelligence, you have to choose your own adventure. You have to be bigger than the people above you because they don't know what you can do. They don't understand our job. And if you have the people skills, you need to be off the camp all the time, every day.
Yeah.
And nobody wants you to do that. Yes. And I'll just tell this really brief story just to kind of let you set up and talk about this. But I went up to this battle captain. For everybody watching, the battle captain drives the unit's operations for 12 hours. And they're every 12 hours, there's 2 dudes and they rotate this thing out, 2 dudes or ladies. And by dudes, I mean anybody. And so I go up to this guy and I'm like, hey, if you knew about a person who had important access to get off the post and was going on solo missions, knew what they were doing, had a lot of experience, would you want to know about that? Or would you want them to not tell you about that? And the guy's like, I would not want to know anything about it, but I'd want that person to have a call sign and a radio and a grid if possible. And we just had this kind of coded talk where I had to go do what I had to do because I couldn't have a platoon with me. I just couldn't. And I wasn't being reckless, but I didn't want to put him on Front Street for not knowing. But he's like, no, I'm fine to be on Front Street, just radio. And then I'll and so no one said anything, but we knew everything. So there's this sorting out process that good people have. And there's a respect and there's communication. And if you're not needed, it's fine. There's no hurt feelings. But that's sort of what I've noticed on the good side.
Yeah, I really enjoyed working with the military. I was in Iraq in early 03. And we were, outside of Afghanistan, we were just figuring out how to work, sort of as a community, the IC and the military together. And it was really interesting, right? It was fun. And I was still pretty fresh. I'd been in the agency by that time 4 years.
Okay.
3 years, just over 3 years. And my last day of cover training, going through the training to pretend to be who I was 9/11. So, it was kind of interesting. I went out, a few weeks later to the Middle East. And so it was still pretty fresh, and there was like 5-6 dudes like me in a covert facility with a couple teams of JSOC, and it was, we sort of made it up as we went, right? Because there wasn't a playbook at that time, and
Right.
it was, one thing that I always go back to. We have a saying in the agency, you never lie inside the building, right? So you got to be. That's a real no-go, right? You can't try and bullshit
Right.
when there's no reason to, and you got to be able to bring value, right? Do you bring value? And then you got to do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Right? That's, of course, it's always nice to under promise and over deliver, but at the end of the day, you got to say, you got to do what you say you can do. And that, that sort of makes all the difference. And then when people start working together, especially, the best teams I've ever worked on, everyone had different skill sets, right? The ideal team isn't 6 guys that do the same thing, right?
Right.
The ideal skill set is six folks that do different things. It'd be great if they had a sub skill that overlapped, right? Just in case. But you want people to do different things, and everyone understands what the other person does and respects that and makes the space for it. And the only way to do that is when people aren't full of shit, and they do what they say they're going to do, and they're not assholes, right? That's the only way all that whole system works.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. One of the other things that I've benefited from, and this is not by design, this looks in the rearview mirror and you're like, hey, that was smart. It was because I moved around and, was in the Army 3 different ways, knew how to look, the experience I had in Bosnia shaped my career, right? And I was desperate to go somewhere and do something. I wanted to get a battle patch, and, in the mid 90s, you had to try to really fight for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I was glad to go to Bosnia. It was hard. It was impossible. It was great. But that taught me how to go in the field. It taught me the pace of work, and it made me invaluable to every unit afterwards. And I only got better and better and better. But the thing that makes my career unique, and all of our careers are unique, but the thing that made my career unique, I stayed at the ground level. So I didn't promote up in the Army and become someone who ran ops or who, ran a platoon. Yeah. I stayed at the ground, and I got better and better and better and better. I got so good, Christopher, that I could tell you why. I knew the doctrine. I could say why I wasn't doing it in this particular case, to the point where I was the placement and access, because I had the ability to move around like, the other guys couldn't do. So I could go and create that over the course of a year and really generate things. That's not the book. That's not the book's answer at all. But I got better and better and better and better by doing the job over and over again. When I would talk to our peers who weren't as seasoned, I would say, when do you think you became great at the job? And it's always however many months they were deployed. Like, what if you doubled that number? They're like, oh man, I'd be a lot better. But we're not afforded that, right? Like, even in the CIA, like, you have to promote it, you have to go run a station, that kind of thing. So do you feel like you ever got to the point of like mastery in the field where any situation you could go and you could reliably start to perform outside of the office?
Yeah, I did feel like I hit. So I've only come to realize this in the last few years. It took me a little while to realize this, but I tend to do everything the hardest possible way. I don't know why. It's a thing, right? And there are definitely ways I could have done things better. So like I went to college and then enlisted, right? Maybe not the smartest way to do things, right?
Guilty.
But at the same time, right? I feel like, so what I did, what I was absolutely focused on in my whole career was building a foundation of competence before I led, right? I was absolutely, maybe to the point of shooting myself in the foot at times, I was absolutely focused on building a foundation of competence, because the people that I respected the most had that competence, and then became leaders. So I said, that's what I want to do. So what I did, and it's slowed me down, but then I caught up again, promotion wise. I did 5 straight tours in the Middle East. And, that takes a toll, right? It took a real toll in a lot of different ways. I was undercover. I moved around a lot. In the way I did things is when I left one place, I literally cut off everything and started fresh, right? For various operational security reasons. So, you do that for 10 straight years and it gets a little tricky. And it was only my family and my best friend from growing up who really knew what I did. Obviously people have suspicions, but they don't really know. So, but I did get to my sort of nirvana in a sense, because I did so many operations, and it was fun. So when I was going through the farm, I missed the military. And so what I did is I re-enlisted in the reserves. And I ended up with the 2 coolest jobs on the planet, right?
Yeah.
And I had the 1 reserve slot in a JSOC unit, and they used to fly me back to do some stuff for them, not operational stuff. Training. Let's call it training. It was training, and I came to realize pretty quickly, like, I spent so much time just day in and day out, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, that I got very good at the tradecraft, what we literally call tradecraft.
Yeah.
And surveillance detection routes and stuff like that. I was doing 2 or 3 a day, and it was just absolutely insane. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. Don't get me wrong. I would have done more if I could. And it just, I built up that foundation, and I had no desire to go into management at all until I was serving in, I won't say where, Middle East, in the largest place I served in. And I had a boss, the chief, crazy fucking dude. And if I say his name to other agency folks, everyone knows his name. It's really funny. Yeah. And he was just one of those characters, little characters. But I saw the way he was able to take a strategic relationship with a foreign intelligence service and bring it to a whole nother level. So it's akin to, like, an SF-A team doing foreign internal defense, where they take a larger unit and train it and maximize it and put it on target, right? It's very similar to that, And so you have this one dude, and he was really doing most of it himself. He was a cocky son of a bitch, but he could do it, right?
Yeah.
He had the skills to do it. And so I thought, wow, that's really interesting, right? And I've been, where we met was in a very tactical organization, right? We did tactical CI in 165th. And I felt confident in the tactical side. And then I moved into the agency, and you're doing tactical in one sense, in that you're doing face-to-face stuff that, you can kind of see the immediate benefits, but it's part of a larger strategic process, right? And you start to realize, when you do these very strategic level things, that there are, the tactical is a first order magnitude effect. Strategic becomes second, third, fourth order magnitude, right? So after seeing this guy in that same tour, I got bumped up to a manager job, not senior, just, I managed that same office I'd worked in, which was the spooky side of things. And I started going to manager meetings, And then it started clicking, right? Because then you start seeing
Uh-huh.
how these individual operations fit into the bigger picture,
Oh
right?
boy.
Then you really start to understand, first of all, you start to understand risks, right? Because, okay, I know what's going to happen if I screw up my thing and my guy gets caught, right? In my narrow view, you know, best case scenario, I'm P&G. Worst case, I'm stuck in a prison for a while, whatever, or get shit beat out of me. Could get shot, but probably not, right? If I'm in a sort of friendly country.
Right.
But you start understanding, what if the whole program gets wrapped up, right? And this was a country where things had happened previously where they had risen to that level. So you start seeing those calculations, what happens. And that, you look at what's going on right now with Ukraine and other things, like decisions to send weapon systems, decisions to fund, decisions to send trainers, all this stuff.
Yep.
I mean, this stuff is literally being used to lethal effect against Russian troops. So you have your first order of magnitude can have a strategic, but even second and third order, right? There's so much going on right now that it's very easy to think these things as tactical, but you look at, so one of the things I looking at strategic issues, there's it's a small little article, and it's not even news, but Medvedev, the former Putin's sort of number two, said that because of Ukraine blowing up Nord Stream pipeline, that means Russia should have free hand to blow up undersea data cables, right? And it's like there's an order of magnitude of the fact that that goes 2 or 3 levels up, right? And now we've also we've isolated Russia from the world's financial system a lot. We cut them off from SWIFT a couple of years ago, right? Which is the bank messaging system to understand all that stuff. So like what do they lose by getting cut out of the world financial system? Not much. They're already cut off, right? So it's like there's a lot going on, and I'm not sure people are always aware of that stuff. Sorry, soapbox again.
One of the things you're talking about in here too, I think is important, because that nirvana, right? When you get there, so I'm like, I think I've got a system, and so I had a new commander come in, and one commander handed me off to the next commander, me as the source, not here's the space, the battle space. Like, hey, here's your battle space and everything. Here is Pete. You need to put Pete on patrols. You need to listen to Pete. And then, so I learned how to predict the future because these guys taught me how to do it. And so that next unit, I got up right away to speak, because normally you got to like work your way in. Who is this guy? And I'm like, look, you don't need to worry about me. You just need to put me behind a captain. And so what I would tell these guys is, in 3 weeks, you'll get what I do. And in 3 months, you'll look at me and you'll say, Pete, we couldn't be doing this without you. You're like an integral thing. You're like the most important person. Sit on my couch whenever you want. You don't have to say that to me in 3 months, because I'll look at you, you'll look at me, and we'll go like this, and then we'll move on and we'll get back to work. And these commanders all took the bait, because I promised this thing that I could do. I knew how to do it. I've done it. I mean, I've done it unit after unit. Yeah. I went to Afghanistan. I did it again. I did it again. And so like, I know how to do this now. Right? So I've reached that nirvana point where I knew how to do it. And to go to your thing, one of the things I learned, and you pick up these bits every now and then, and like, this is the part that we have to give these guys ahead of time, even if they don't get it. Major General Wolf at the time, he ran the 82nd Airborne, the division. He was a division commander. He's like, the thing I can't get enough of, Pete, is you. I need more from guys like you. I need the ground truth. I know more than everybody in my command about war. That's my job. But I can't know more than you. So I need you to teach me. And so, and he's like, that quote about, amateurs talk about tactics. Like, that's bullshit. Because if we're not doing the right thing on the ground, none of it matters upstream, because we're not adding the tactics. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a long way of saying this. I'm trying to describe a very complex topic. I know you're with me, but for the audience's sake. So I go to a new unit and I watch how they brief. They talk about their missions, their problem sets. I don't need any lieutenant or captain to tell me what my intelligence requirement is. I look in the wall and I go, this is all fucked up. I can fix this. I can teach these guys how to be more accurate in what they're doing. Here's the thing I did. I made a lot of money doing, not money, but I earned a lot of credit with units. they would go out and they would do something. Hey, we're going to go talk to the farmers about fruit trees. I would go back 2 weeks later and be like, hey, what happened here 2 weeks ago? Because I guarantee you, what I found out was not what was briefed to the boss. And so the boss would look around and be like, what did you find out about fruit trees, Pete? And I'd be like, here's what I found out. And it would be all a whole new world, right? So it would all be different stuff. And what is our job? Our job is to give whoever we work for, in my case, the commander, the tools they need to win. Like, hey, there's 1,000 dudes over there.
Yeah.
Hey, you're sending guys over here telling you that they're winning the farmer fight. It ain't happening, boss man. I don't know what to do, but I can tell you what you're doing ain't working. So then the commander can be like, stop that, do something else, or whatever. And so that's that whole spherical operational picture where you're talking about strategic, theoretic, political, but also I am on the ground checking it, and so that was how I approached it. It sounds like you found the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, tactics is always part of strategy. It really has to be. And I always just kind of think of it as the first order, right? It's
right.
Kind of the near term effect is the tactical. But the idea that a tactic doesn't feed into a strategy is kind of foolish. So yeah, and I think having one of the huge things with experience, and that's building the foundation, sort of that bedrock foundation behind skill, is you need to be able to anticipate, right? And that helps when you're mentoring. It helps when you're checking, in operation. I worked in some places that were so tricky. We used to have like 3 different briefings in order to get the final go ahead, right? To do an op, right?
It's a real thing.
Because there was significant risk, and you need that foundation because you need to be able to ask the questions. My first boss in the agency was a guy who ended up retiring as the head of all counterterrorism, assistant director of counterterrorism. His name is Huttleston. Great dude. He was my first boss in the field, and I remember I used to plan an operation, a meeting, even just a meeting, which I mean technically is an operation, but it was a baby operation. And I used to go in there like, okay, so what are the variables you think about? I'm like, I got it all covered, X, Y, and Z. And he's like, okay, that's great, but what about A, B, C, and J? And I'm like, shit, I'll be right back, right? I'd run back to my office and like try to figure this shit out. And it was great because he had that foundational knowledge, right? But he didn't just vomit it on me. He didn't just tell me this is what you need to do. Because, you do learn. You don't learn as fast though, right? Yeah. You don't learn as deeply. Figuring it out, having some gentle guidance and sometimes not gentle, but having some guidance by someone you respect that has done the job, that really helps you kind of think about, okay, what am I missing here, right? And then you start, and it was almost year to the day that I went into his office ready to brief him. He was like, how do you think, how do you feel about this? Are you ready to go? Did you think about it? I'm like, yeah. I go, I thought about this and this and this. He's like, okay, go do it. Yeah. Right. It wasn't right. It was really interesting. And that, that comes from respect. And, he had the foundation. I respected that. So I listened to him. And of course I have to have enough humility to say like, maybe I don't know it all. Hard for me, but maybe I don't. Right. And I really enjoyed that. And I tried to replicate that, when I became the boss. It's not easy, it's not always easy, but I really enjoyed it. That was one of my favorite parts of the job. Yeah. Was work with doing kind of just sort of spitballing ideas on how to do ops. And I don't think I ever, even at my most senior, I don't think I ever actually told an officer how to do their operation. Right. You can't. I never did. We would go back and forth. I definitely gave them suggestions. I definitely got them thinking, but I don't
Yes.
think I ever actually said, do this and this and this and this. I said, what about this? And like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But what if we did this? What if I did this? And I'm like, well, that sounds really interesting, right? And so, you know, and that was my absolute favorite part of the job. That was sometimes more fun than doing the job myself, right? Yeah. Seeing you know, a more junior person doing that, kind of the light goes on and they get excited, but at the same time, they're really kind of getting it. And that was a real pleasure to do that.
Man, that is, you know, look, I hear what you're putting down, and it's so similar for me. And, you know, look, this is the code. This is the alpha talk, right? Like when alphas are sorting out amongst alphas, you have to find your area and be great in that area. Like, I'm just going to go be like, so just for example, I would show up to an A team and I'd be like, hey, I can help. And they'd be like, great, murder board time. I would throw them my stuff and it would be no questions. And so they knew, like, Pete will handle the human side of it, whatever we need. And we're just going to leave him alone. He'll write all the reports. He'll do all the work. He'll get better information than us anyhow. And they would shut the fuck up. Same thing with the SEALs. Didn't matter, right? Because I knew my stuff. So there is a sorting on where you can be the thing that you need to be. And some people are, you know, a multi-tool. They just do whatever. Like, I just do whatever isn't done. And they do it and they're great. So there's all kinds of that sorting out that goes on. But I love hearing you talk about these things. One of the things that I had to learn for myself, maybe someone offered it, but it didn't stick until I had to learn it, was never tell the commander what to do, because the staff will kill me. The staff will undermine me. I am doing their job. So I have to say, I have to say to them, I can't tell you what to do. The staff has to do their job. I'm glad to participate. And they'd be like, no, Pete, I'm ordering you to help me figure this out. And I'm like, you have to protect me because these guys will undermine me and it'll make my job harder. And I can't stay out in front of you guys if I'm stuck here doing staff work. And they're like, all right, cool. And I'm like, so here are some rules of thumb that I find useful. One, are we building trust? Are we meeting new people all the time? And if we're not going to have the future fuel to solve these problems. I can't tell you about this problem, but I can tell you we can't stack enough wood. We have to go out, and I'm the person that should be do that. So get me out to more places, you know? And that's what I would tell them is like, I can't tell you how to do a job. I can show you what's not working. You're the boss. You apply your tools to it. And if you need my help, do it, but always protect me. And the other thing I would say to them, Christopher, was that I can put a message in as high up as you want into the messaging machine above you. And I can be candid. I don't have to, I'm not bound by anybody else's rules because of the nature of my job. And they would see that and they would say, like, okay. And it would be amazing the vertical communication things we could accomplish. And I'm going to shut up here in a second, but we were having success. We were taking it to the Taliban. It was wintertime. They were bedded down. We were gaining influence. This is an enormously hard thing to do. And I'm big on, you ready for that? I'm big on affect over effect. I don't care how many bodies you think you stacked. I care what people feel about it, right? And if I can gather the right affect that allows us to grow, then we'll win. So I'm talking about these things, and all of a sudden someone up higher is like, these guys need a PSYOP team. And my boss, because we worked together, was able to say, fuck your PSYOPs team. That'll take us backwards. We're going 100 miles an hour here. Yeah. We don't need those guys. And like, well, we order you to take them. He's like, well, I order them off the camp. I guess we're stuck. And so he had the ability, because we'd worked together vertically, to reject something that absolutely would undermine our mission. And that's no knock on PSYOP dudes. But sometimes when you add something in, it takes away from your operational ability.
That would be a great T-shirt. We need more pamphlets, right?
Yeah, yes.
That will win the war. We need more pamphlets.
Oh my God, yeah. And they're doing what they're supposed to do, right? Like, hey, these guys don't have this asset. Yeah, that's okay. We're doing fine without it. When you look at your day-to-day stuff, right? Like, I wanted to find out how much time did it take you, including the Army time, to get to Nirvana? When did you like, I can do this anywhere, anytime, across? Like, I know what I'm doing now.
3 tours.
3 tours. Okay.
Agency tours. Yeah. Three agency
tours.
So
quite a ways into your career.
Yeah. And the agency you get promoted to a certain rank and it's considered full performance. And so maybe that was in my head a little bit, but that's where I felt where it was really kind of clicking. And after my 3rd tour, my 4th tour was my first command. And I definitely felt like I could do a lot, right?
Yeah.
I was still learning, don't get me wrong. And then in my fourth tour was my first command, but it was a tiny, tiny command. It was perfect. It was perfect in almost every way.
Right.
Because I got to do whatever I wanted to do, but I was the boss. It was absolutely perfect. And I was someplace where people actually cared. There was for a year straight, we were putting, every week we had something going in the PDB. Can you imagine that? It was unbelievable, right? And then my fifth tour was a very senior chief job that was unbelievably political, and that was like a brick to the head, you know. And my specialty is not political. My specialty is kind of quiet competence. I don't mean to say I'm quiet, but I mean I don't, you know, I don't need to tell everyone all this great stuff that I'm doing. I like to, the proof is in the pudding kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, and it's not, you know, I did it you know, successfully, but it was, I don't think I realized how complicated it is. And, you know, one of the funny things, you know, when you, I found as I went senior, this was a complete misunderstanding on my part, that I thought the more senior you get, the fewer people tell you what to do. And it is exactly the opposite. It is exactly the opposite. When you're, you know, when you're the grunt or the whatever, you got literally one person telling you what to do, the squad leader, whatever it is, right? You got one person. No one else can, you know, essentially tells you what to do. I didn't realize when I got, you know, pretty senior in this senior role, all of a sudden, like a lot of people, and I mean a lot of senior people, like, you know, I'm getting memos from the 7th floor, which is, you know, the boss's floor, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? I thought it was supposed to be like, let's no, it was, and I'm like, wow, that was a total failure of that was a total misunderstanding on my part. I really, you know, so it's like there were definitely, it was probably 20 minutes a day for several years when I was like, God damn it, this used to be fun, right? It used to be fun. And it, you know, and it just was like, oh, so that, but you know, my sweet spot was tours 3 and 4 out of 6. They were, you know, my competency kept going up, but 5 and 6 got messy. There was just so much politics, right? Strategery, and I mean, with the extra R in there, strategery got like off the charts. And it just wasn't. There was also a lot going on at the time. It was messy, and there were some things I didn't agree with in, you know, at the senior executive White House level, that, you know, how people understood the Middle East, and they weren't listening to people that understood the Middle East. So I don't want to say, let's say I went back to brief some, I took a senior foreign leader back to brief some folks, and we had to sit there and listen to this American person that had spent, you know, like 6 weeks in the Middle East tell us what the Middle East is like, right? The person I brought back had literally survived multiple assassination attempts, right? You know, 30 years as a senior leader, and, you know, and everything this person knew, the American person knew, they knew from my reporting, or my office's reporting, right? And they sat there and told us how things are, and I'm like, you know, you can tell us how, you know, the perception of things, that's fine. The perception of things in the White House and the NSC, right? Yep. And the but like the idea that you're telling me about what's actually happening there, that was like, oh my God, that was painful. That was painful.
How many examples can I give you right now in the next 10 minutes? Like the exact same thing. I'll just give you one. I'm just outside of Sadr City. The U.S. military is no longer allowed to go in there. That's the deal. But they are popping out and launching mortars at the green zone. This is a problem for everybody. And so part of my job is to prevent that through presence with the Army, but also through my clever questions. And so we're doing that. I happen to have an Iraqi interpreter who's like, why don't I just go into Sadr City and I'll go drinking in this park? that I like to go drinking in. And I'm like, you can drink alcohol in Slaughter City? He's like, oh yeah, all the time. Nobody cares. And so and I'm like, well, I am not tasking you because I don't have that authority. So if you want to go do things in your spare time, great. I'm glad to give you time to go take care of your family. And so I informally had this guy going out and doing this. I happened to be back at the big palace and at Victory, Maine, which is the main place for everybody who doesn't know. And a guy several branches up from me who's like, he was a PhD. His job was to write things. And I'm like, hey, I hear you're writing about Slaughter City. I have an amazing resource that has given me great information. I don't know how long I'll have it. Are you at all interested in getting real stuff day to day from the ground? And he said, no, thank you. It's like, you got to be kidding me. You just and he's like, no, I'm reading these reports, and I'm like, motherfucker, what do you think you're going to get from me? You're going to get whatever question you have. I can probably get it answered, but he didn't want it, and I'm like, how can I take anybody? Look, I respect everybody's intellect and their desire to do the right thing, but how do I take anybody in that office seriously now? It's just like, you guys, come on.
Yeah.
So do you got like 5 or 10 more minutes for me, or do you got to go?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So first thing I want to say is, okay, so Pete and Christopher are going to go off and do a mission, right? The government comes, hey, we need you guys one last time, right? Like a movie. And they tell us a country that we're not strong in. Maybe we're familiar with some way, but we want you guys to go there because we know you guys have ground skills. How much money do we need, and how likely are we to succeed? This is not an impossible mission. This is a standard mission. And then how hard are we working every day? What does that look like, do you think?
Well, a lot of it depends on what we understand. Have we been in a country? Do we speak the language? Do we understand the culture, right? Because
no.
You really
no. We have no advantage there at all.
That's tricky. You gotta be patient then, right?
These
things don't happen overnight. Because you need time just to understand. First of all, if it's a country where bullets are flying, first and foremost, you have to understand the safety situation, right? So you have to understand
so it's
where
dangerous,
you can go.
Dangerous but permissible.
But dangerous but permissible can mean a lot of things, right? Are there places where a dude like me can't go? And what does that look like? So you have to understand that, right?
Yeah.
The other question I have is, what kind of resource? Do we have any national level resources? And how much money, right? How much money do I actually have?
Well, they're asking you, how much money do you need?
Hold on. I have a 14-year-old that's yelling at me, but I'll be done in a minute. Be patient.
The commander, the true commander.
Be patient. Okay, but right. I'll be there in a sec. So, you really have to. This is a lot of really setting the stage for people to understand the realities, right?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about, and we had to deal with this when in war zones, when the pace is much faster than in a more permissive environment.
I love this.
It can take months to find a source and build a relationship. First of all, just spot it, right? Spot, assess, develop, recruit. Spotting can be very difficult if you're coming in cold, right? So what does that mean? Generally, I don't like taxi drivers except if they can tell you where certain neighborhoods are, right? But they don't know anything.
Yeah.
So you're trying to spot. And what does that mean, right? Spotting. What are you trying to understand? Are you just trying to understand where it's safe, right? Are you trying to scope a certain location? Is this like a NEO operation where you're trying to, non-combatant evacuation operation? Is that what it is? Because that's very different. You don't necessarily need sources for that, right? That's a ground truth, right? But if you're trying to airdrop into a country cold, and you're trying to gather strategic bits of intelligence from a secret location, a secret safe file cabinet person, right? There's going to be a process there to understand who is in the circle, right? And you have to expand that circle out until you have a reason to get there. And then what cover do you have, right?
Right.
Cover is used to gain access to people. It's not to protect what you do. So what cover do you have? If I go in there as a adventure tourist, well, I sure as shit don't have any reason to go to to the presidential office or the National Assembly or something like that, right?
Right.
So all those things need to be properly scoped in advance, right? What documents do I have? Things like that. So cover and documents are going to be essential. And if you, depending on the country and how good their service is, what do you know about their service, right? The moment I hit the airport, it might even be the moment I make a reservation, they might know who I am. Because I don't, depending on how good their CI folks are, right?
Right.
And especially nowadays, how deep is your cover? What kind of backstopping you have? All right. So let's put all that aside. Let's say you have cover.
Okay.
Let's say your documents are good. You get in, no problem. You're in the city. I mean, you got to figure out where the people live and work that you're trying to talk to, right?
Yeah.
So, where do these people live and work, right? Yeah. And then you got to figure out, all right, what kind of politics do they follow? What kind of interests do they have, right? So you're trying to, and then you got to, you got to figure out where they're going. So what is that? That might take surveillance. Are you, people like me we're not the surveillance assets, right? There are separate assets that do surveillance, right? Yes. So do you have surveillance? Let's say you do have a surveillance asset, right? And by asset, it could be, could be technical, could be other things, right? Not necessarily a person. So let's say I have a surveillance asset. Okay, so now I might know where the office where the guy works that I want to know about. Now I want to know who we think he confides in or has access to that stuff, right? And then you kind of got to go, you start narrow and kind of build out. Now, every now and then, one of those guys he's good to go, right? He just cares about money. He doesn't give a shit. So, hey, okay, give me a duffel bag of $5 million, right? Now, I'm not a big fan of cold approaches, right? They usually don't work. Right. But if you do your homework on the individual and you have enough money, they could work. Yeah. Right. So there's,
every one of these steps has variables too, right? The whole thing is
so many variables.
Shaky ground.
Does he have a security detail, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to know, is he cheating on his wife? Does he cat around? Does he go to clubs? What does he look for? Right. Yeah. Motivations and vulnerabilities, right? Those are absolute keys in understanding this target, because the smart operative does not approach without really understanding he's got a better than 50% chance of getting a yes.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
If time is of the essence and it's not a, it's not just some random dip circuit thing where you could probably bump into the person again in a week or something like that. If this is a one-shot thing, you better do it right. So
I love that you illustrated all those pieces, because there's these steps and you get to somewhere and it's like, well, what do I do today? And one of the questions I asked you was, what's the pace of work? And if you and I were to go open up a little mini field office and just to help us understand this particular country, whatever country it is, if you're good, the organization will say, you guys can do this in about 2 weeks, right? And we're going to laugh in their face and be like, no, it takes way more than that. I mean, it might take us a year. If you want us to do it in 4 months, maybe we're talking about something very hasty that we can do, but you have to set their expectations too. So if you do go somewhere, we're working, I don't know about you, but I'm working every day, 12 hours a day. And it's going to be hyper expensive because I cannot stop working because I'm always behind it. I always have to work ahead and more than what my adversary is doing. I have to outwork the problem, and there won't be enough of us.
Yeah. I mean, I remember Iraq. They had to force us to take some time off because we were doing, every 2 weeks we were doing 100 hours of overtime.
Yeah, easy. When you would turn in a slip to the government, to people who don't know, they work in Kansas or whatever, and you're like, I worked 115 hours this week. They're like, that's impossible. Like, I work for the 82nd Airborne. If I have to, I sleep while we're going from A to B. And if you're sleeping, you can't bill that. I'm like, I'm in a fucking MRAP. What's not billable about I have one more question for you, and this is not political, but people are missing some things about DC and its actions to protect classified. If you look at DC right now as an adversarial intel collector, if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to. I look at it and I go, man, this is right. Like, I can take anything from this place. Like, I would invest resources like crazy right now and say, take your time. These folks are not going to figure us out. They're not going to catch each other. They're just going to, I can set up ops indefinitely there and invest a reasonable amount of money for a country. Is that a fair assessment, or are you pretty happy with our ability to protect things when you see all of the massive, like, look, we have any number of problems with DC with classified. It's not just President
Trump. So I can't talk too much about that because I worked with FBI domestically on some of these issues.
Yeah, no, let's not talk about
FBI actually holds my clearance right now.
Yeah.
I would say, what I will say is there is a system, and there are a lot of very committed folks to ensuring the protection of classified information. Where things get messy is when things go outside of the normal realm of classified. All right. And so people that are not trained to handle it is where things get messy on all sides. Right. The idea that anybody would take a box of classified home is mind-boggling, I think, to any of us. It's absolutely mind-boggling, right? And it just, I can't even fathom it. And so I think it upends the system because the system says everyone knows you don't do that, right? Everyone knows that, right? All of us went through training, but the problem is, by virtue of being an elected official, officials get a clearance, right? They don't go through the same process we go through.
Right.
So literally by virtue of being elected, winning a public, not the people that work for them. The people that work for them have to go through a clearance process. But by virtue of being an elected official, our system says you get a clearance. But they don't have the same, part of it is bandwidth. They don't have the same, it's not their life, right? In dealing with classified. They're not a professional staffer. They don't have people around them that brief them on this stuff. So I do think it's a problem. I didn't think it was a problem. I didn't know it was a problem until a few years ago. I do think there's a decent infrastructure. We have great CI folks in the FBI and some other organizations. But I think the idea of elected officials mishandling classified is just, it's a bit of a bridge too far for your regular FBI folks, right? The people that are called on to protect classified on a day-to-day. They like, what is an SSA, a senior special agent who runs the CI squad? What is he going to go to some senator's office, and much less the president or, a vice president or majority leader, whatever it might be, right? So, and the only way to fix that, I hate to say it, but I think it probably would have to be Congress that kind of fix itself, but I don't know how it does that. The president can make some executive orders, but you could, because of separation of branches, somebody in Congress can say the executive order doesn't affect me, right? Because I'm in Congress, right? Or I'm in Supreme Court, whatever it might be. Right. So I think that's a tricky one, but I think they're going to have to go after people that mishandle classified and then let the court sort it out. I think that's what they're sort of going to have to do. I don't see any other way around it, because the rest of us what happens, Reality Winner and folks like that. How do you prosecute them for a couple I don't know how many she took, but for, let's say, a couple documents, or 10 or 100, when there's a former president or current president, whatever, that has boxes full, right? It just upends the system. And if I'm one of their defense attorneys, I'm going to say, like, hey, clearly it doesn't freaking matter. Right?
What's the problem? People went to jail for thumb drives into the wrong hole.
Imagine this.
And then you tell me, and this, again, not a political statement, You tell me there's TSSCI on a server in your house? You have a foreign agent working as your chief of staff, congressperson?
Yeah.
Like, and look, it's a great environment for us CI folks to go, let me at them. Let's go turn people. But that's not what we want in our national capital. Anyhow, and it is very tricky, and we are trying to solve these problems, but it is a little hard to take seriously in this particular case where they have all these earlier cases. And if there's one, there's 10. And so, anyhow, listen, I don't want to take you more of your time. I've had you for almost an hour.
I'm getting the hook from a 14-year-old. Move it. I'll be there in a minute. Yeah.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate you. Anything you want to say in closing before I wrap this up?
No, it was great. I enjoyed it. I'd love to reconnect with folks. Anyone should, feel free to ping me or however. It's great.
I'm going to connect you with Jensen.
Yeah. That was a great time in my life. I have really nothing but positive memories of 165th and my time there. It really was a fantastic introduction to military and the IC and everything like that. I just really had a good time there. So, all
right, man. I'm going to hang up on you. Have a great day. Thank you so much, man. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by your